You're watching ASOTUCon 2024, presented in collaboration with Reynolds and Gubagoo.
Thanks to our studio partner, Automotive Mastermind, for making this panel happen.
Hey, listen, my name is David Spizak. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, hopefully I will during the course of the event. I have the pleasure and the honor today of spending time speaking with Mike Cavanaugh. And Mike is with Lithia Driveway. Mike has got a storied career, but I hope you don't mind this, Mike, just because I have just deep reverence and respect. But Mike also served in the armed forces.
Thank you.
Two tours of duty, decorated veteran. And I say this, we got Memorial Day coming up at the end of the month. I also served in the military, undecorated.
You still get a round of applause. Let's give David a round of applause.
I was the lucky one, actually, because we were not in the heat of battle at the time that I was there. But Michael is the regional VP of Lithia's pivotal in developing Driveway, Lithia's online platform. Under his leadership, Driveway launched in 2021, quickly expanding across the country with a team of 750, focusing on providing comprehensive online vehicle buying, selling, and servicing solutions, reflecting his dedication to innovation and customer service in the automotive space. Now, Mike leads Lithia's Central Region, particularly the Suburban Collection in Michigan. What a storied, absolutely storied automotive group there. And they've got 33 locations and over 2,500 team members and the 5 Wild Auto stores in Wisconsin. I would ask you, politely, respectfully, please welcome Mr. Mike Cavanaugh. Mike, good to be with you.
Thank you.
And we have the good fortune of, and thank you, by the way, for taking the time to join us. We have the good fortune of speaking on the subject of leadership. And Mike, I want to start out with this. I know that one of the programs that was under your jurisdiction was an acronym that was called LEAD. So I think that leadership is something that we've been talking about over the test of time. But I think more than ever, automotive is going through a transition today like we've never seen. A transition that's affecting our people, a transition that's affecting profitability, a transition that's affecting how we deal with clients, how we work with clients. And my question to you is, could you share with everybody what the LEAD program is, why it's important, and exactly what it's done? What have you seen, the impact that it's had on the organization?
Yeah, for sure. So the LEAD program is something I developed a little bit, probably about 2 years ago at this point. And LEAD is an acronym, stands for Leadership, Execution, Accountability, and Development. And I think we have a lot of training in the industry where we train people on like tactical skills, right? We train salespeople on overcoming objections. We train, service writers how to write ROs, maybe sell specific products. But when it came to how to be a leader, right, not a manager, not a department manager, but a leader, it was something that we lacked. And as a lot of you probably know, Lithia is a group that grows pretty fast. We have a lot of acquisitions, and you need future leaders. You always have to be ready. So it was a program that I typically work with platform general managers, multi-store general managers, some general managers directly as well too. But it was an opportunity for me to spend time with GSMs, service managers, used car managers, people at kind of the next department level to get them ready to, one day be a GM. Part of the genesis of it was to lead by example, to say, hey, you should be doing this with your salespeople, your finance people, your service advisors, your parts advisors, to be helping them get ready to be a more effective leader with people. And I think there's, especially coming out of the COVID period where we lacked a lot of accountability because things were so easy, that A in LEAD was a really important piece, because sometimes accountability is a dirty word for people, that they don't want to hold people accountable. They feel like they're not being friendly or nice to their team. But I always like to say that, there's a difference between being a friend and an acquaintance. A friend is somebody who tells you what you need to hear, and an acquaintance is somebody who tells you what you want to hear. And sometimes as managers, we tend to tell people what they want to hear, maybe tell them they're doing a good job when they're doing a subpar job, but we never really help them perform at the highest level that they can perform. So it was just helping people with some of those skills to become a more effective leader and not just a manager.
Thank you, Mike. Every dealership that I work with and every dealership that I've ever worked with across the country, to this day, one of the ongoing challenges, they say, is finding great people, finding them, targeting the right people, getting them on board, and then keeping those people. I bring this up because I find that there's a lot of managers across the country, and dealers even, that have an inherent fear of holding people accountable. They have an inherent fear of changing a pay plan or doing something, some shift that they feel might result in people walking out the door. As you went through this program, developed it, and implemented it, did you see an impact that it had on people's mindset with that regard? Because if you don't have, well, let's start with this. If you don't have a great culture, if you don't have a culture in your store, you don't have accountability. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%.
There's nothing to hold them accountable to. And if you don't have accountability, then there's no way that you're going to have the level of consistency or execution. So what did you see as a result of that program? And what would you say to any dealer who has managers that are struggling with that mindset?
Yeah, so I mean, a good example is on a sports team, right? Is, you know, when you're a coach, whether you're a position coach or you're an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach, right? If you don't hold your players accountable, you're probably not going to win a whole lot of games, right? And I think sometimes we can get stuck in mediocrity a little bit when we're afraid to hold people accountable. But to your point of a culture, if you want to have a high performance culture, you have to be really clear about what high performance looks like. And part of what I teach in that LEAD program as well is kind of a framework, right, of what this looks like. And there's really 5 steps to it. So one is right people, right seats. You have to start with the right people in the right seats and be good at finding what that looks like, right? So it doesn't mean that you've been in the automotive industry for 10 years or 15 years or you've been a finance manager before, but it's, you know, looking for people with a kind of a coachable mentality that want to get better. But, you know, once you decide that you've got the right people in the right seats, which typically means you hired them. So once you hired them, you've got an obligation to them at that point, right? And that starts with the next one, which is clear expectations. So you've got to set clear expectations with people in any department, in any role. It's not just what are the outcomes, right? So I expect you to sell 15 cars a month, right? If that's, you know, your expectations, well, what else gets you there? You know, what are the clear expectations? Is it, you know, you need to follow the work plan in the CRM? Do you need to do these things? But really breaking it down to people. And some of what I learned from this was coaching my son at basketball. And, you know, when you tell a 6th grader, you know, to set a pick for the first time and they look at you kind of like you're crazy, it really lights up in your mind where you're like, hey, if I've got a new salesperson and I don't understand or explain the why behind why they need to do certain things and how that's going to benefit them, you know, I need to slow down and take the time to do that. So it's, you know, clear expectations. Then the next one is training, right? I've been to a lot of sessions in this room today and heard almost everybody talk about the importance of training. We actually have to train our people. We can't just throw them to the wolves and hope they succeed and then say they suck, right? I think, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times in automotive, you hear managers that talk about their own team members and they're like, this guy sucks, right? And it's like, well, whose fault is that?
I want to work there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great book, and I don't know how many of you guys have read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, but I mean, it's kind of like, whose fault is that if your team sucks? That's your fault, right? You haven't done these things. So training is a big piece of it. You've got to train your people. The next one is remove obstacles. You've got to remove obstacles. So ask them questions. You actually have to know their people. And part, again, of this program is to say, like, intentionally spend time one-on-one or in a group with your people to get to know them and ask them questions and genuinely care about it, right? Not just ask them questions because you think you're supposed to, but ask them, hey, what else could I do? What obstacles could I remove? What can I help you with that's going to help you be more successful? And they're going to tell you that. And then the last one is accountability. Then at that point, then you've kind of earned the right to hold somebody accountable. But if you just hire them and tell them to sell 15 cars and they don't, and then 90 days later you say they suck, and you fire them, you're in this kind of endless cycle of the same thing over and over again. So to answer your question, what kind of has come from this is driving high performance in every department and achieving things that we haven't achieved before when it comes to, you know, used car growth, F&I average, growth in service, areas that we historically thought we would hit a cap because you said this is, you know, Michigan in suburban was a storied group that thought they were very high performing, but in terms of, you know, what we've seen other dealerships do, they weren't. So we needed to kind of redefine what good looks like for everybody. And we've seen leaders progress from, you know, GSMs to AGMs and GMs to run their stores, and service managers. We've got more fixed ops guys running stores now than we've probably ever had before. You know, that people that I got to spend time with and understand, you know, how they think about things and how they, you know, solve problems and can they drive high performance across the board. So we've seen, you know, a lot of growth.
Thank you. So this is just my personal opinion. I think this is, or I'm thinking about when you watch something late at night and, you know, you're up later than you should be, and some black screen comes on and there's writing that says the views of the person you're about to see are not necessarily reflective of the station. So this is just me. Sorry, I had this disclaimer. And this is being taped, so I'll be invited back for sure. It's not that bad. I believe that we've come to the end of an era, in my humble opinion, when it comes to new cars. New cars has always been the department. Fixed ops has been the other department. Used cars has been the other department. Parts has been the other department. I believe today, in my humble opinion, that you will find that new cars is now the other department. You agree? You better stand up, bro. Ed Roberts. And I say this because, and I'm interested in your opinion here, Mike. I say this because in order to have a absolutely spectacular new car month, it seems to me, you have to have the right inventory, right? Got to have enough inventory. It's got to be stocked with the right product, right engines, right stuff that your customers are looking for. It's got to be supported with programs that are compelling enough to make me get off the couch. 0% for 36 months with a $1,600 payment probably isn't it. Stellantis. Moment of silence. May they rest in peace. No, I love my Stellantis. I love my Stellantis dealers, but come on, 36 months, 0%. And then you have to have, hopefully, a healthy market around you. And yes, you have to have a sales team that gets it done. But if you think about that, 4 of the 5 things it takes to have a great new car month are out of your hands. What else can you do in life where you have, speaking of sports teams, you have 20% of the control, but you're responsible for 100% of the accountability? Well, here's good news. You have 100% responsibility, accountability, and decision-making when it comes to fixed. You have 100% with used cars. You control the inventory, the product, the prices, the market. Am I right, Tony? Okay. You have 100% when it comes to parts. So I think that it's time to make a shift. I bring this up, Mike, because I would say easily 95% of the leaders, the GMs, the dealers in our industry came from where?
New cars.
New cars. Sales, and most of them out of the new car department. My prediction is 25 years from now, you're going to see a lot more, to your point, coming out of fixed, coming out of used. And you know what? Coming out of the financial office. And you know what? They should. They should. So my question to you is that in and of itself is going to take leadership. I believe that that's going to happen at the consolidation level because they're going to be the ones who figure that out, I think, fastest and understand the implications of it. What would you say in terms of what should a dealer or dealer group do today to come to that realization, and what should they do moving forward to prepare themselves to have a sustainably successful organization?
That's a great question. I think that's probably a pretty complex question to unpack in totality here.
By design.
I'll try at this point. I mean, I think going into 2024 at the end of the year, I had a conversation with my team and I said, fixed ops will be the foundation that we build the business off of from here going forward, right? It was the other department always, right? And especially in a market like Metro Detroit where we do a lot of leasing, right? It was kind of like people come in for maybe maintenance. These cars are a little bit treated as throwaways for most people. We don't put a ton of time, effort, energy there. I think there was a bit of a culture where, maybe service made money, maybe it didn't. It wasn't really that important. But, the benefit that we have at a large organization and looking at, composites across 315 stores in the U.S. is we can really see, unlocking the potential of your business. What does it look like when you put more time, effort, and energy and focus into running a successful service department? And I think a recent stat was that, 70% of our customers defect. Think about that, right? When we're selling millions
90% of your customers cannot remember the name of who they bought a car from 12 months ago. 90%. Crazy.
Yeah, and there's that saying too, right? You sell your first car in sales and you sell every car after that in service. So I think, we've put probably more effort into developing our people and our processes and service than ever before. And the customer service aspect, I think, is huge. That was one thing that's, been a major focus for us. And I think this thing right here is probably going to be the death of, a lot of people in their career and their income is this, whether you're in sales or you're in service. I can't tell you, and I'd look around the room, how many people, quick show of hands, up here are from a dealership, right? Now, I say this in a little bit extreme manner, but I could probably bet my 7-year-old daughter's life that I could walk into any dealership and see somebody on their phone and not working while they're at work in sales or in service, right? Like, this is an epidemic.
This is a revelation.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's true. It's absolutely true. It's crazy. It's the death of productivity, I think, right? And not, it's funny. I go into a dealership, and this is no joke. And they've got one of my software platforms in there, and the dealer right away says, "Hey, you're messing up our network." And I said, "How am I messing up your network?" He said, "Oh, everything's slowed down with your system." And I said, "There's no way that we don't have that drag on the network." I said, "Let me take a look around." So I take a look around, and you know what was causing it? Take a guess.
YouTube.
Streaming video. They were uploading. They weren't just downloading, they were uploading. You know how you could go into the web browser and you could see history? Oh, man. It was awesome. It was like HR was busy that day. But they were going to the browser, and they're spending time in the racks. This is technicians. And they were uploading, they were downloading, they were on their mobile phones. It's crazy. It is the death of us. How do you deal with that?
Again, going back to clear expectations, right? So I think you have to set the expectations that when you come to work, it's time to work, right? And I think, some stores you can say, hey, look, when you're on the showroom floor, you don't have your cell phone out on your desk, right? You put it in your desk, or if you have to make a call, you go to the break room or whatever it may be. We don't have policies like that. We're a very decentralized organization. I think that
amazing.
The perception
as large
of a
as
big
you are,
public,
that you are decentralized like that.
Yeah, a lot of people think you're a big public. Everybody does everything the same way. You have all these controls, but I mean, we have 315 stores, and we probably do things 315 different ways.
Yeah.
We really empower the GM to set the culture, and we have core values, right, of, earn customers for life, take personal ownership, improve constantly, and have fun. Those values should be the same across the board, but other than that, we don't have policies that we enforce with things like, cell phone usage, but I think it's up to, the leader how to handle it. And some things that I do are just, hey, do you think that's going to make you more money, what you're doing? Do you think that's going to help you better serve a customer? And sometimes you don't have to be a jerk. You can just casually say that to somebody, and they'll say, almost feel guilty, like, oh my gosh, like, so
you're better than that.
So if my wife sees my daughter on her iPad at 10 o'clock at night, so you have the same feeling, like, oh man, I know I'm not supposed to be on this. I feel guilty, right? But I think a lot of it goes to, one, do you genuinely want to serve people when they come in? Because I can tell you, customers walk by salespeople that are seated right by the front desk. And when I sold cars, I wanted the seat closest to the front door so I could take every single, up that came in, right? Every single opportunity that came in, I wanted to get. My hand was on the phone the whole time. And now you can see things where customers walk past people, whether they're in sales or in service. Sometimes they walk past people. The phone rings and people don't answer it because they're so caught up in TikTok or YouTube or whatever it may be. So I think, each leader has to handle that a little bit differently, but it does start with clear expectations with people, and then accountability daily. Just when you see it, call it out, because it goes back to what you said earlier, is I think people are afraid, because it's hard to recruit people, it's hard to retain people, that if I hold someone accountable, they're going to leave. But do you want the person that's on their phone all day?
It's a great question. How many people have read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins? You may recall, he mentioned getting the right people on the bus and getting them on the right seat on the bus. But there was also a page in there where he said, if somebody leaves, ask yourself this question. If they came in and said, hey, I just want to let you know I'm leaving, would you be upset? And the second question is, would you hire them back? And if the answer to both of those are no, you got to ask yourself, why is that person in your building? I had the good fortune of attending the retail conference put on by Presidio Group. And when you have a conference that opens with Nick Saban and it closes with Carl Sewell, that's going to be a pretty good conference, right? Well, Nick Saban said something really interesting. He said, before the draft, these kids go to the combine and they measure them, they weigh them, and how fast you could go, how high you could jump, how much you could press. But he said ultimately, at the end of all that, they interview him. And this is really powerful. I want you to take this back because it matters. And I want to ask if you agree. I think you're going to. He said, so we would talk about a player, and we would say, hey, Mike Cavanaugh is a middle linebacker. He played for Georgia in the SEC. He led the SEC in tackles. He ran the 40 and 4.6, good strength, very agile, and academic All-American and captain of the football team.
It's all true.
Okay? So I have pictures to prove fine is true. And then David Spizak. By the way, I look better than that picture. I don't. That was photoshopped. But David Spizak is an edge rusher, led the ACC in quarterback sacks, passes deflected, ran the 40 fastest 40 time we had for that position, but has problems staying in shape and had some domestic issues. The butts never get drafted. There's a reason. I want you to ask yourself, I want you to ask your managers, do we have any butts in the store? Because if we do, we're responsible. If we do, we're complicit. If we do, we're sending a message. Every time we hire somebody, you're either elevating your culture or bringing it down. Every time you say yes to somebody being hired, right? You are putting out there what your leadership beliefs are. Every time you bring somebody on board, it makes a difference. Now, here's the kicker. I believe that many of the greatest leaders in organizations, dealerships, don't even have the title manager. Do you agree with that? Yes. I got support people that have leadership capabilities, valets, people in the office. And leadership to me, Mike, is about emotional IQ. It's about caring, about work ethic. It's about drive. It's about doing the right thing. So the question that I ask you is, number one, do you agree with all that? And number two, don't you think it's more important at this point, if we really want to shift, to stop focusing on somebody's experience, whether they've got experience with CDK or Reynolds or Viato, and pay more attention to things like that? If we want them to be leaders, why don't we find people that have the seeds of leadership? Do you agree?
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
How do you do that?
Well, I mean, very similar process, right? Is you have to know your people, and that's kind of what we go back to what we were talking about, where you have to spend the time to get to know your people, know their character, know about them, right? And we oftentimes say that there's a lot of retention issues or turnover issues in the industry, but do you actually know your people? Do you know if they're married? Do you know their wife's name? Do you know if they have kids? Do you know if they play sports, right? Do you know if they're a good mom or a good dad? Do you know if they're, they have problems outside of work, whatever that may be, but, you have to, I think, really get to know the person and their character before you put them in a leadership role, because there's only a select number of leadership roles in any dealership, right? You've probably got, a GSM, you've got a service manager, a parts manager, you've got a used car manager, new car manager, right? The people that you decide to put in those roles are a direct reflection of you and what you define as important. So if you put somebody in that role, you promote somebody to that role, you hire somebody into that role, you're saying, this is what I believe great looks like, not just good looks like, great looks like. This is a person that I think you should strive to be like. This is somebody who I think is going to be a good mentor for you. And if they're not, people are going to lose confidence in you as a leader. If you're the GM or you're the owner of the store, they're going to lose confidence in you as well. And even with individual contributors, the first time that I ran a sales floor, I had a mentor of mine, and he told me, a vacant house is better than a bad tenant, right? And it really stuck with me for the rest of my career, is that sometimes we hire because we need a body. I need another salesperson really bad. We lost 2 salespeople. I need another body in here. I need another advisor. I need another body in here, right? But they create more problems than you realize sometimes, and oftentimes you don't realize how many problems they created until they're gone.
I agree.
So
it's always the wake, right? It's always the wake. It's brilliantly said. And that's why my belief, personally, is that anybody who's out there who has a recruit to replace process, recruit to replace mindset, I would strongly urge you to stop doing that and replace it with a recruit to upgrade process. So it's interesting, when you look at the greatest companies out there, once they have positions filled, it's not like there's seats at a wedding and that's all done and it's locked and loaded. People have to earn those positions. And it's interesting, the harder it is to get a job, the more pride people have in a job. Isn't that true? The easier it is to get a job at a dealership, the less they respect that job. So when you have to fight to get something, you really hold on to it. And if you think about it, I don't want to wait till I lose an advisor to start looking for an advisor. You know why? What if the best advisor in your market was available 3 weeks ago? Well, if you were in recruit to upgrade mode, you would be recruiting every single day, which means you would always have access to 100% of the best talent, the best people out there in your marketplace. Otherwise, when you recruit to replace, who do you have access to? Whoever's left. The cars that didn't get sold at the auction. No offense, but let's be real, right? Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. If you think about it, I'll give you a quick example. I was going around to the stores and I met a new salesperson one day and I told them who I was and they asked, so what do you do? Right? And I said, well, a big part of my job is to make sure we've got the right people in the right seats. Right? And I've read Good to Great a bunch of times, right? So that's something that's ingrained in my brain, right? And they said, man, if that's a big part of your job, you must spend a ton of time, recruiting people, networking, interviewing people. And I said, man, thank you, because I don't spend nearly enough time doing that. And it really kind of lit the fuse in me that says, if I don't intentionally focus on this all the time as an important part of my job, to your point, if I'm trying to be reactive, if we lose a GM or we lose, an important position, right? I'm going to be stuck scrambling, trying to fill a role. And I think just about everybody in this room, when you've made a bad hire, you can reflect and look back and you saw all the red flags. 100%. You saw all of them, but you didn't want to acknowledge them. You took the charm, and think about it. We're in a business where we hire a lot of people who are in sales in some respect, right? So they're pretty good at selling themselves. You see the best possible version of themselves. You see the social media version of them.
Analogous to dating, isn't it? It is. I mean, have you ever seen a resume that says, well, I don't like authority, and I've got an anger issue, and I'm not very motivated. I have had a habit of stealing. You don't see every resume, man or woman, they look like Superman and Superwoman, right? The great Zig Ziglar once said, oh wait, the train's coming through. The great Zig Ziglar once said, most people stop looking for work the minute they get hired for a job. True? So how many of us have gone out on a date and you date somebody and you like certain things about them, but even though you notice things that are quirks, right?
Is that like the Oscars when they start playing the music? Is it our time to get off the stage at this point?
You notice that, and then, hey! My show, damn it. Yeah, that totally. Anyways, but listen, you noticed it, they're quirks, and the quirks develop into what? Annoyances. And then you can't stand it, and you move on, because what you notice is those quirks, and all of a sudden the things you thought were important on the first date aren't that important. And I think it's the same with employees. I got to ask Mike one last question. You had a very interesting thought, notion, intention, and that had to do with composites. Could you talk to everybody about your thoughts on how we could leverage the composite concept, almost that 20 group concept, with our people?
Yeah, I would say, so one of the luxuries that we have at a large dealer group is we've got a lot of composites for every store, every department, everything we can have. But, to have composites for your salespeople to show what's really, what they're capable of, to show them not just who's selling the most cars, but who's generating the most gross as well and providing the most benefit for the dealership. Same thing with advisors, but you don't have to be a heavy-handed manager and tell people they're not good at their job. You can share a lot of data and share best practices and get people in a room. And we have kind of summits where we'll get together managers or salespeople or F&I managers, whatever it may be, to work together to learn best practices. And you kind of myth bust in those things, what people think they weren't capable of before, without you having to do a whole lot other than put the right people together on a Teams meeting or in a room together. They help level themselves up. So I think a lot of being a good leader is helping share data and get people to help level each other up. It's a community.
I love it. Before we break, anybody have a question for Mike?
I think they want happy hour.
If anybody has questions for me, I'm a Scorpio. My favorite movie is The Notebook. I'm kidding. That's not true. It's true. It's not true. It's true. It's not true. It's not true. Yes, you in the back that I paid $5.
So when you arrived at Suburban, what was the biggest pushback you received from all the departments that you didn't expect actually?
All of them.
Restate the question.
Yeah, for audio. So the question was, when I arrived with the Suburban Collection in Michigan, what was the most pushback that I got from a department perspective, and how do we overcome it? I'll probably say F&I, right? So there was a culture there where there was kind of a certain dollar amount and a certain level of profit that was looked at as excellent, that you would get high-fived at, and I won't share that amount here. Might get a chuckle. But there was a certain dollar amount that people looked at as, that's it, and because we're in this market, or because we're this store, or because we do this much leasing, it's impossible. And I really just had to find one example of somebody that was outperforming that in that market and say, oh, it must just be different 15 minutes away from here. And I actually was met with the objection of, well, in this part of the metro, people are a lot more discerning, when it comes to buying F&I products.
Then why are you working here?
Yeah, exactly. So really, we just gradually, one by one, leveled it up, and we went kind of, the overcome the objection was the area, and then it was the OEM, and then we overcame it with, one of the OEMs. It was domestics, and well, it's just because they're luxury, but it's really just providing the examples and kind of starting one by one and creating champions that you can kind of point to say, well, if they're doing it, why can't you? And I think we've, doubled that number over the course of a year and some change, probably.
What's crazy about that is, think about this from a leadership perspective. Whoever was the leader, no offense, in that store, they put up with that, didn't they? And by putting up with that, what happens? They what? They endorsed it. They endorsed it. They gave a hall pass to everybody in there. It's crazy. I've said forever that whatever you can't get your people to do becomes your job. True? And you just made me think of something. Whatever limitations your people have become your limitations. Right?
There's a good video.
That
if you've
person
ever,
had big
ever looked
limitations.
It up, it's Steve Harvey did a talk, and it talked about take the lid off the jar, and it talked about a flea, right? I won't share the whole story,
too, yeah.
right? But I mean,
it's
a
amazing.
Phenomenal video. If you just look up Steve Harvey, take the lid off the jar, there's probably several people.
They put fleas in a mason jar, and they cover it, with the gold lid, those jam jars, and then they poke holes. You got to be kind to fleas. You don't want PETA all over you. So they put holes in there so the little fleas can breathe, and the fleas jump up. And what's amazing about fleas is what? They can jump ridiculously high. So they would do this. Their little flea heads would hit the top of the mason jar. And then something interesting happened. After what? They stopped how high they were jumping. They adjusted it. And once they did that, they could take the lid off the mason jar, and they would never be able to jump out of the jar.
And
right?
They had babies, and the babies would only jump that high as well, too, right? But interestingly enough, you take the lid off the jar, right? And that's really kind of the example that we talked a lot about and shared a lot was as managers, as leaders, we need you to take the lid off the jar. Don't put an artificial cap on people. Let them see what they can do, right? If people thought that selling 10 cars was good, right? Take the lid off the jar. Quit saying 10 is good, right? If we know that a lot of people all over the place are doing 15, look at 15 is good and show them the people that are doing 20, 30, 40. I mean, we had one guy last month that sold 90
Go
cars.
see Jonathan Dawson. I posted a week and a half ago, and people went bananas, 40,000 people. I said, when I started in the business in the 80s, you know what the average number of sales per person was? What was it? 10. In the 90s, CRMs came for the first time. And by the end of the 90s, what was it? 10. In the 2000s came, and we've got digital technology, e-commerce. What was it? 2010s came along. 10. You know what it is in 2024? 10. So the technology is advancing. The people are not. Technology will not advance our people. That takes, to your point, leadership, right?
Right.
And on that note, Guys, I thank you for joining us. Mike Kavanaugh, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend time with you. And hopefully we will see you guys around here. We will answer any and all questions you may have of other people.